everybody, and welcome to Lesson 4.1, Agriculture and Animal Husbandry. The content in this video is aligned to the third edition of Environmental Science for AP and is aligned to CED Units 5.3 through 5.7, 5.14, and 5.15. To this point, we've talked about environmental and systems thinking, the available resources the Earth provides, and the dynamics that led us to a human population of just under 8 billion. Now we will begin looking at the ways in which that human population makes use of the natural resources provided to us. Here are our content objectives for this lesson. When humans use natural resources, they alter natural systems. And humans can mitigate their impact on land and water resources through sustainable use. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe changes in agricultural practices, describe agricultural practices that cause environmental damage, describe different methods of irrigation, describe the benefits and drawbacks of different methods of irrigation, describe the benefits and drawbacks of different methods of pest control, describe integrated pest management, describe the benefits and drawbacks of integrated pest management, identify different methods of meat production, describe the benefits and drawbacks of different methods of meat production, and describe sustainable agricultural and food production practices. All of this is to answer our guiding question: how do we meet our nutritional needs? You've heard all your life about the importance of a balanced diet, how you need a good mix of fruits, vegetables, grains, proteins, and dairy in order to meet your daily energy nutritional needs. In the majority of the developed world, eating is an afterthought for most people. Getting the right balance of nutrition is essential for a healthy and appropriate development of the body and all of its systems. Even minor fluctuations of carbs, fats, and proteins can change the way the body functions. Let's look at the My Plate diagram. Looking at this, we can see that the majority of our diet is suggested to be made up of vegetables and whole grains, followed by protein, fruits, and dairy. In order for our bodies to function appropriately, we need the combination of macro and micronutrients that are found in a variety of food sources. Not only do those food sources provide those nutrients, but they also provide energy in measurable units called kilocalories, or in nutritional terms, a calorie. Remember that these are equivalent terms and are not part of a conversion. Kilocalories is the actual measure of energy released from the reactions when the cell is using these energy resources. A calorie is the term used by nutritionists. They are the same thing. Notice how your calorie needs change based on your age, biological makeup, and activity level. Children need fewer calories, but more proteins and vitamins and minerals to support their growth and development. Women in reproductive age need a different ratio of various vitamins and minerals based on whether or not they are or intend to become pregnant. Males, who tend to be predisposed to naturally larger muscle mass, need more calories and more protein, particularly in the teenage years to support rapid growth. The point here is that while we all need many of the same nutrients and macromolecules, the energy needs vary from person to person and will change over their lifetime. Why are vegetables and whole grains so important? They contain a large number of micronutrients and other compounds for producing vitamins as well as fiber, the tough cell wall structure of cellulose that is part of a healthy digestive system. But they are also high in natural complex carbohydrates, which our bodies use as fuel through cellular respiration. Complex carbohydrates take more work to break down, therefore provide longer lasting and sustained energy. Vegetables and grains also provide healthy oils and fats. Proteins provide key components of muscle development, as well as healthy fats and oils that are used for cellular structure. They can contribute essential amino acids, the building blocks of proteins that our bodies cannot make on their own, and can be a source of last resort energy. Fruits do much the same as vegetables and grains, although they are more likely to have simple sugars. Dairy provides other amino acids as well as additional vitamins and minerals, such as calcium. Fats in various forms are found in meat, vegetables, and dairy. These fats are essential for our cellular development as well as cushioning and support for our bones and muscles. When we talk about nutrition, there are typically three terms that we need to discuss: malnutrition, overnutrition, and undernutrition. People who are over or undernourished can be considered malnourished as well. Malnutrition deals with the quality of the calories being eaten. Stated in a different way, malnutrition looks at the combination of vitamins, minerals, micro and macronutrients that an individual ingests. If these values are not enough to provide the individual with their minimal needs for these things, the person is said to be malnourished. Over and undernutrition, however, have to deal with the quantity of calories. As you may guess, individuals who are overnourished ingest more calories than their bodies need, and if they are not used through activity, those extra calories go through the process of being stored in the body, often as fat. Undernourished individuals ingest fewer calories than their bodies need, and are often skeletally thin and often suffer from a variety of nutritional deficiencies, such as beriberi, rickets, goiters, and severe anemia. It is entirely possible for someone who is overnourished to experience these deficiencies, but they are far more common in those individuals who do not obtain sufficient calories. Here is one of the effects of malnutrition. Both of these diseases are indicative of a severe deficit in protein. On the left, you see a child with kwashiorkor, with the characteristic moon face and swollen belly. A lack of protein leads individuals to retain as much skin-related fat as possible. The enlargement of the liver, which causes the swollen belly, is often due to the body breaking down the organ for the raw materials to build muscles. On the right, you see a child with marasmus, which on top of having a deficiency in protein, also comes with a severe deficit in calories. This causes the rapid deterioration of the subcutaneous and other body fats. Individuals with marasmus have characteristic emaciated skeletal appearances, as well as sunken eyes. While these diseases are more common in LDCs, it can appear in areas of MDCs, particularly those that are hard hit economically and which are part of food deserts. This map of the continental United States shows areas of food deserts. A food desert is a location in which people have little to no access to healthy food options, particularly fresh fruits and vegetables, due to a lack of markets within convenient driving distance. Take note of where the largest groupings of food deserts are located. Now, let's take a look at these four maps, which explore areas based on income, car availability, and the health indicators obesity and diabetes. Notice anything? These maps light up in the population-dense areas of the Southeast across all four indicators. They flow into the Midwest, the breadbasket of America. If you take the time to pause this video and compare these maps to the one on the previous slide, you'll notice that the areas indicated on these maps line up well with areas of known food deserts across the U.S. If we were to dig even deeper into these known food deserts, we would likely find that they are largely made up of Black and brown individuals. Food deserts are four times more likely to occur in minority neighborhoods, where gas stations, corner stores, and fast food vastly outweigh traditional grocery stores, let alone places like Whole Foods. Food deserts are areas of concentrated food insecurity, or the condition of being unsure of where one's next meal will come from. Food insecurity can worsen during times of famine, which result in large numbers of deaths due to starvation. Famines can occur because of climate change, socioeconomic and socio-political events, as well as through disease-based or pest-based crop failure. Food production is divided into one of two categories: industrial or subsistence agriculture. Let's take a look at each of these in detail. Industrial agriculture, also known as agribusiness, came to prominence after the Industrial Revolution. Agribusiness makes use of mechanization and economies of scale to produce large amounts of a single crop or animal product. It is considered to be intensive, as it requires large amounts of inputs in the form of fossil fuels, water, and raw materials to produce machinery and other required components. The products of agribusiness are said to have a high energy subsidy, which is the measure of fossil fuel or human energy that is used to produce 1 calorie of food. The graph on the right compares the energy subsidies of various types of agriculture. Additionally, agribusiness is designed for the sole purpose of returning a significant profit. This is benefited through the use of economies of scale, which explains that as the output of a product increases, the average cost of production decreases. Basically, the more agribusiness produces, the cheaper it becomes. The other side of the agricultural coin is subsistence agriculture. This is the oldest form of agriculture, and its purpose is to feed the farmer and their family. It is considered extensive due to the vastly smaller scale than that of agribusiness. Subsistence agriculture has a very low energy subsidy. This comes from the fact that the process is not done for profit. Leftovers may be given to neighbors, traded, or sold at a farmer's market, but most of the products go to feeding the farmer and other residents of the farm. It is important to note that, in general, agribusiness has a vastly higher ecological footprint than subsistence agriculture. We will look at each kind of agriculture in turn as we move forward. Before we discuss industrial agriculture, it is important that we discuss the events of the 20th century associated with what is known as the Green Revolution. The process began in the 1940s with modifications to growing practices designed to increase yields in various plants. It continued on into the 1970s and into the present time with the exploration of genetically modified organisms, GMOs, and genetically modified foods, GMFs. There were two waves of the Green Revolution, although some would argue that we are in the third wave with the extensive use of GMOs, each with their own purpose. The first Green Revolution in the early stages of the process was designed to increase yields, particularly of wheat, in areas such as Mexico, India, and the Philippines. The goal was to provide more food for a growing population through selectively breeding strains of wheat to be more disease resistant and to provide more biomass for consumption. This increased yield led to the need for more energy input to harvest and maintain. This led to the second Green Revolution, which changed agricultural practices through increasing mechanization and the application of industrial practices to food production. We will look at how the second Green Revolution has played a role in agribusiness as we move forward. One thing to note is that the Green Revolution can be seen as a solution to the Malthusian catastrophe. We know that food production in a natural setting is linear, and we know that it will not be able to support an exponentially growing population. However, the application of these new growing methods and options have provided a larger mass of food. By shifting agricultural practices and using selective breeding and genetic modification, we are able to provide enough food for the people on the planet to each have their dietary needs met. Remember that ending world hunger isn't a problem of producing the food. It's a problem of getting it where it needs to be. The Green Revolution led to what we know as industrial agriculture today. We've discussed at some length the impact of mechanization up to this point, the fossil fuel requirements for obtaining raw materials for machinery, the production of machinery, and the running of those machines during the process of farming. Let's take a look at the other four big impacts of industrial agriculture. Monocropping is the process of using a plot of land to grow a single crop year after year. This is highly useful in order to produce large yields of items that are used extensively, such as grain and corn, or cash crops like cotton, sugar, and bananas. A single farm can focus on growing one type of crop in order to provide the biggest yield and receive the biggest profit. However, monocropping has multiple drawbacks. The first is that the soil will quickly degrade. Without natural process to replace things such as nitrogen and phosphorus, fertilizers, whether synthetic or natural, must be used to replace those nutrients. Additionally, monocropping makes it highly likely that plants could be harmed through disease or pest. As we've already mentioned, industrial agriculture relies heavily on fertilizer. Organic fertilizer, composed of dead organic matter, is commonly used in areas where animals are nearby to produce manure. However, when this is not available, synthetic or inorganic fertilizers are used. These are the NPKs that are notorious for causing cultural eutrophication. Inorganic fertilizers require vast amounts of energy in the form of fossil fuels to be produced. They do have several benefits over organic fertilizers in that they can be specifically designed for particular combinations of nutrients and are generally easy to apply. However, they contribute to nutrient leaching as they do not provide organic material for the soil. Irrigation is an additional requirement for much of industrial agriculture. Whereas our ancestors settled floodplains rife with fresh water and healthy soil to farm, current farms require massive amounts of water to be diverted from streams and rivers in order to provide the required water for the farms. Irrigation ditches and channels, called furrow irrigation, can be designed to carry water to specific fields or places in fields, while flood irrigation is designed to cover the entire field in water. The most efficient use of irrigation is drip or spray irrigation, in which water is given directly to those plants that need it via a pipe beneath the soil or a mechanized sprayer. Irrigation can cause problems such as runoff, waterlogging, and salinization. Waterlogging occurs when the water table rises so high that it drowns the roots of the plants by preventing oxygen exchange with the soil. Salinization occurs when water evaporates, leaving behind dissolved salts. As more water evaporates, the salt concentration of the soil increases, making it difficult for soils to recover. Lastly, we have pesticides. We may note earlier that the large amount of monocropping led to an increase in the chance that a pest will damage a crop. Pesticides provide a method of reducing or eliminating the problem. Pesticides can be natural or synthetic compounds that are introduced into a field in order to reduce or entirely eliminate a population of pests. In general, pesticides are designed for the pest category it is trying to eliminate. Herbicides are for plants. Fungicides are for fungi. Insecticides are for insects. These are known as narrow spectrum or selective pesticides. Broad spectrum pesticides, such as fumigants, can be used as well, although they are a target for a larger number and type of pests. There are several problems associated with pesticides. First is the fact that many of them are persistent, meaning that they remain in the ecosystem for a long time without being broken down. The best example of this is DDT, which was used until the 1970s, but it can still be found in our bodies and in the ecosystem at large. Second is the fact that pesticide use can lead to pesticide resistance, in a phenomenon known as the pesticide treadmill. In truth, this is simply an example of coevolution. Let's walk through how this process occurs. A pest population is infesting a crop. Farmers apply a pesticide to kill them. Some of the organisms survive the pesticide. The farmer applies additional pesticide to kill those that remain. Some will survive the second, third, even fourth applications. These organisms have become resistant to that particular pesticide. This requires a new pesticide to be made or applied. Some organisms may die, but there will still be some that will survive that new pesticide. The process continues, some organisms always surviving the application and becoming resistant to the pesticides. As more pests become resistant, stronger formulas have to be produced, which can have more detrimental effects on the ecosystem. The Green Revolution has driven us toward the use of genetic modification practices. But let's be clear, humans have been taking an active role in genetic modification for as long as we have been taking part in agriculture and animal husbandry. Genetic modification is simply the change in the alleles or gene pool of an organism or population. The corn that we see today has been artificially selected for larger ears. Dogs have been genetically modified from wolves. This is nothing new. But what most people think when they hear genetic modification is actually genetic engineering, or what pop culture calls frankenfruits. Genetic modification and genetic engineering allow us to choose characteristics that are genetic, or genes, to transfer between organisms and even between species to create characteristics that are better suited to our needs. For example, we can take a specific gene from Arctic fish and transplant them into plants to help them grow in colder climates. We aren't creating a fish plant. We're simply taking a genetic characteristic that is helpful and applying it to another organism, the same one or different. Let me put it this way. Eating a plant with the antifreeze gene is not going to affect you. Unfortunately, you will not develop the ability to produce antifreeze and survive cold temperatures. The DNA in the foods you eat are broken down by your digestive system. It does not get incorporated into your cells. There are multiple benefits of GMOs. The ability to modify these organisms allows us to produce organisms that produce higher yields per unit input. This means they can use less land, less water, and fewer pesticides. This can lead to greater profits for companies that are producing these foods. Additionally, these foods can be modified to have a higher nutrient content. Golden rice was modified from a rice strain in order to introduce more vitamin A. It was introduced to address a deficiency in developing countries. This can potentially help reduce malnutrition and eventually hunger. Note that the most abundant GMOs on the market today are corn, soybeans, and cotton. However, there are some concerns that go along with GMOs, although they are very different than the ones that are vocalized in the media. Legitimate concerns come from uncertainty about potential antigens produced by the plant that may trigger allergic reactions. There are concerns about the impacts of GMOs on the biodiversity of other areas. For example, what happens when this kind of unplanned crossbreeding occurs? Lastly, there are concerns about the legality of using these products, particularly when crossbreeding occurs between a field that has GMOs and one that doesn't, especially since farmers must often pay for the right to use GM crops. Additionally, there are other regulatory problems. Should GMOs be labeled? How should the science of GMOs be communicated to the general public? These are the real concerns that legitimate scientists have about the use of GMOs and GMFs. Animal husbandry is the practice of raising animals for the purpose of obtaining products such as meat, eggs, milk, or wool. Animal husbandry arose out of animal domestication, where through a series of interconnected events and coevolution, we tamed animals to live alongside us and oftentimes to be unable to survive without us. To this point, we've talked about industrial agriculture. We'll continue that discussion here to talk about industrial animal husbandry. This happens almost exclusively on what are known as CAFOs, or central animal feeding operations. These CAFOs have large numbers of animals held together in small pens or fields for the purpose of raising them to maturity or slaughtering weight as quickly as possible. Cows, for example, are fed calorie-dense corn rather than grass in order to gain weight and produce more milk or more meat. Chickens have been selected to grow faster, so much so that they often cannot bear their own weight for more than a few steps. In addition to being bastions of animal cruelty, CAFOs also have multiple other environmental effects. Diseases can run rampant in these areas, particularly those that are associated with waste products. Cows on an all-corn diet are more likely to develop infectious strains of E. coli that is then passed from one animal to the next in manure. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria develops as animals are given preventative antibiotics in their food to keep them from getting sick. Additionally, manure can run off into nearby streams and leave massive cultural eutrophication in its wake. This is just the start of the problem with CAFOs. The environmental and racial justice issues are just too numerous to name here. Let's look at the opposite side of the coin, sustainable agriculture. These practices are some of the oldest in the world when we talk about things such as shifting agriculture and nomadic grazing for animals. These practices allow plots of land to remain fallow or unused for a specific period of time in order to recover their nutrient content. Often, a cover crop is planted, such as grass or clover, in order to prevent soil erosion. This practice also helps protect against soil compaction, which reduces the amount of water soil can hold and increases the chances of high-level erosion or desertification. Beyond these long-standing practices come even more sustainable and environmentally friendly methods of agriculture. The goal of sustainable agriculture is threefold: to produce the nutritional and material needs of an individual or individuals, maintain and protect soil viability, and provide sufficient profit for the farmer. One of the biggest practices of sustainable agriculture is what is known as polyculture, or the practice of planting multiple types of plants in a single field. For example, you may plant beans, squash, corn, and wheat in the same field. There is a specific type of polyculture known as intercropping, which uses two overlapping or complementary growing season plants. These plants are synergistic. They help each other in terms of producing particular nutrients. You can also use what is called polyvarietal agriculture, in which you plant multiple strands or species of the same crop in the same field. For example, you might plant 3 or 4 different genetic strains of wheat in the same place at the same time. Another practice close to polyculture is called agroforestry, or alley cropping. In this practice, trees and shrubs are planted in conjunction with crops in order to protect the soil and provide wind and water breaks. The use of fruit-bearing trees can increase the profitability of a plot of land that is used for crops. Other practices are related to reducing soil disturbance. Two of the most commonly used practices are contour plowing and no-till agriculture. Contour plowing produces crop fields that are aligned to the terrain. This is sometimes called terracing if it is done on a mountain region. By following the terrain, it is possible to reduce soil loss through wind and water erosion. No-till agriculture is just as it suggests. Plants are chosen in such a way that they require minimal disturbance of the soil to be planted or grown. In this practice, farmers do not turn or till the soil between one season and the next. Leftover biomass from the previous season is often left on the field to decompose and provide nutrients and ground cover. While this is a good practice to avoid soil erosion, the lack of tilling can allow weeds to infiltrate the field, and it requires farmers to apply herbicides more often than in till agriculture. One of the last practices associated with sustainable agriculture is integrated pest management. Let's take a look at this practice in more detail. Integrated pest management is the practice of using a variety of biological, physical, and chemical methods to reduce pest populations. IPM requires that farmers be familiar with the crops that they grow and the types of pests and diseases that tend to infect them. A farmer must know the pest and know their economically viable limit. This means that the farmer must have a clear idea of how much of their crop they are willing to lose to a pest in order to practice IPM. Remember that the purpose of IPM is not to eliminate pests. It is to reduce pests to an economically adaptable and acceptable level. IPM recognizes that pests are part of the natural ecosystem and seeks to manage them with a variety of practices. These practices fall into one of four categories: cultural, mechanical, biological, and chemical. As you can see in the pyramid, cultural practices are preferred as a first step. Cultural practices include modifying the types of crops that are being grown, the location, or even the growing season to avoid a pest population. Mechanical practices include hot water sprays, covering crops with tents, or physically removing the pests by hands or by netting. Biological practices can include introducing natural predators, the use of pheromones to attract pests elsewhere, and the release of genetically modified males who are unable to reproduce. Lastly, chemical practices can be applied as a last option. This is often done when the growing season and pest season overlap and some pests remain, even after applying these other practices. When it comes to chemical application, it is always about choosing the least toxic in the least area for the least amount of time. The following slide provides you with an opportunity to see how some of these ideas are connected together. Feel free to pause the video and explore the statements at the beginning to review.